Theatre Royal. And there's about a week's reading left in the book, so then we'll be at the end of it. So after all these, chapter 60, it's a long time to be reading every day, and I hope you've enjoyed the readings. But anyway, Theatre Royal. The great tenor Frank Ryan sang on the stage of the Theatre Royal on the Mall in Waterford City. Like Caruso, he was a naturally gifted singer who sprang from the land, untrained but brilliant and bursting with talent, just waiting to be unleashed on the world in the 1930s. He died in the early 1960s before he was captured on film, but in 2008 I, along with my sister RoseAnn and a film crew, we set about recreating a moment from his career for a documentary we were making about him. We'd started making documentaries together, RoseAnn and I, when I was still working as a journalist in Dublin. However, in 2008 I applied for and I was awarded a voluntary redundancy package which was on offer in the Irish Times. I wanted to write full-time, so in due course I moved home to Ring. RoseAnn, who wanted to continue making documentaries, also decided to return home, and soon we began to carve out a living as documentary makers for television, making programmes for the Irish language station TG Cahir. Telling the story of Frank Ryan was one of our earliest programmes. He'd been a butcher, a farmer, and an internationally successful tenor. How could TG Cahir resist the idea? We were duly commissioned to make a half-hour documentary about him. RoseAnn, as director, decided to hire the Theatre Royal for an afternoon and ask a local actor, Hank Regan, to come and play the part of the great singer. She asked him to mime the singing of Mo Chuisle, Your Sweet Voice is Calling, and then to bow to an imaginary, rapturous audience. The beautifully restored Victorian auditorium, horseshoe-shaped and intimate, was eerily dark and receptive when we arrived. My job that day was to climb up through the narrow passageways and ladders to the gantry behind the stage, and to man the switch that would both release or raise the red velvet stage curtain as was needed. There was a hush as the lights came on, throwing a lovely glow over Hank. And I remember he was dressed in a tuxedo that day for the part. As he mimed, I waited for a quick call on the mobile to tell me to release the curtains. It came and I pressed the switch. The weights in the curtain's hem brought them to a halt with a satisfying drop. I did it again and again as the filming continued, and I waited in the quiet and looked down from above. All the world was a stage. I was free to dream as I sat in the gantry that day. Under the roof of the old theatre, I began to listen to the ghosts of thespians whispering all around me. I imagined the productions, the smothered laughter, the tippy-toed dashes behind the wings, the divas and the stars. I imagined all the lives that were tied up in that space. I'm not sure whether it was the intoxication of those small, darkened corners, the precariousness of the platform I was standing on, the maniacal nature of our endeavour to create a sense of Frank Ryan's life on stage, or the sheer joy of being at play in a theatre. Maybe it was a combination of all these factors, but being in the gantry of the Theatre Royal created a powerful sense of giddiness in me that afternoon. As I released the curtains again, I tried to smother my laughter. Between takes, I boogied up and down, and I imagined myself flying down to the footlights, airborne like a trapeze artist. As I tried to stifle my giddiness, my own solo moment on the stage of the Theatre Royal many years earlier came back to me. As a child, I had played the part of a guardian angel in a school play for Phelan Scolla. I had been dressed in white to my toes, and I wore wings that were made with wire hangers and covered in white mesh edged with silver sequins and held on with elastic bands. I was to sing solo. My arms held aloft, I glided on and sang about how I would protect two little orphans, a boy and a girl, who were lost and alone in the snow. I remember my 5-year-old self on stage that night and how the footlights blinded me as I looked out at the audience. I can still recall the energy, the electricity of that moment when I made my debut on the Waterford stage. I recall the combined intake of breath as I backed away and how I sidestepped nicely to avoid the upright piano on the stage that had threatened to obstruct my exit. And then I remembered Miriam, my younger sister, on the same stage of the Theatre Royal as a 7-year-old, conducting her class in a performance of How Much Is That Doggy in the Window? With her back to us, her long blonde hair shimmering in the footlights, she kept a steady beat with her baton, and we all gloried in the emphatic rhythm and skill of her 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 hand movements. How proud my parents were. In a few short years, we had left Lower Newtown in Waterford, but my pulse still races when I see Rice Bridge spanning the River Suir on the way into the city, or when I travel up around Reginald's Tower and along the Mall. My heart quickens when I hear the lovely flat Waterford accent. The tug is still there, the tug of that place and those days when the Theatre Royal was a focal point for us in primary school, and when we were both thrilled and terrified to be stepping out onto a city stage on a night filled with firsts. So that's all for today. Thanks for listening. Talk to you again tomorrow. Thank you. Goodbye.